Hey peeps, Sarah here from Sparrow Springs, and today I want to share with you my 5 favorite tips, features, and tools in Photoshop for digital art, specifically for digital painting. Now before I get into that, I want to just share with you real quick, today is day 16 of my Tubetober challenge where I'm posting 1 video a day for the entire month of October. So if you're new here, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications to see all of those new videos. Now, digital painting can be different than other forms of digital art for just a few reasons. A lot of times you're working with raster versus vector, which basically means that you're working with pixels instead of shapes. This drastically affects the different tools that you would use to create your piece. Now, digital painting is a form of digital art that most traditional artists will turn to first when they're just trying out digital. A lot of times we want to mimic traditional tools, so there's different things that you can use. I think the most important feature is that a lot of times you are looking to create a piece of art rather than some sort of design or graphic that's more for a utility. So knowing what your goal is changes which tools you use and how you use them. A disclaimer here that for every function you want to do in Photoshop, there's like 2 or 3 or even more ways to accomplish it. So I've personally been working with Adobe Photoshop since it was 7.0, which came out in 2002. So I've been working with it for over 15 years. I currently use Photoshop CS6, which came out in 2012, and this was the last version to come out that didn't have a subscription. And this program has been my workhorse for everything. When you really learn how to use it, you can literally use it for so many different things. I use it for logo design, for website graphics, for photo editing, photo bashing and photo manipulation, and of course, digital painting. Okay, so let's get into the different tools. The first one is layer modes. Now, this one is probably one of the more common tools that people actually know about. So basically you can go over to your layer and you can change it to all these different modes. And honestly, I like to just flip through these and experiment with them. But the 2 main ones that I use are overlay and multiply. And the reason why I use this so much is because I can really control my highlights and shadows. So I'll have my local color, and this is just the color that things are without any sort of lighting or shadows affecting it, theoretically, if you could have that environment. So for my shadows, I'll use the multiply layer. And this is really fun because you can have different temperature of shadows. Now, most of the time temperatures of shadows are on the cooler side, but you can define just exactly what tone that is. And then same for the highlights, but the highlights I set on overlay. Now this is really fun to have your lights and darks on different layers because you can change the light environment without changing the subject or composition. The second tool that I like to use is levels. Now I know about 3 or 4 different ways to adjust like the values and contrast of a piece, but this one's my favorite. First thing, if I go to my adjustments and levels, you'll see the slider on the bottom, and this is really, if I feel like my values are just blown out, like my highlights are way too bright and my darks are way too dark, I can just pull those sliders in and just reduce the severity of it. Now, a really neat feature about this is the levels display this histogram. And basically, this is kind of a chart of where all of the pixels fall in the value range. So you can see I don't have a lot in my lighter range because overall this is kind of a darker image. Now the fun part is that I can actually pull those sliders in and make those values my brightest brights. And then on the other side, I can also take the darks and pull those in to be my darkest darks. And of course you can adjust your midtones and whatnot, but if you really combine those, I feel like you can really get a lot of different values in here with just minimal effort. So this one's my favorite because I feel like you have the most control. My third favorite tool is the color balance. Now this feature, I feel like there's a lot of other ways that you could also control the color, but this has been the one that I've been the most comfortable with. Now I think my favorite thing about this is that it separates the shadows, midtones, and highlights. So you can really affect each range differently. So if I take my highlights and I pull them more towards the blue range, suddenly the entire piece feels different and you almost get something that looks more like a nighttime scene. Now I like to just go through all of these different ranges and play with it until something feels right. Okay, number 4, this feature is one of my all-time favorites, and that is the ability to create brushes. Now, you can work to make some of your digital brushes mimic traditional brushes, but generally I only use two brushes, and that is the round hard edge brush and then the round soft edge brush. But if you find repetition in your brush strokes and you're doing the same thing over and over again, then you can take that one brush stroke and multiply it and speed up the entire process, which is amazing. So I'll show you real quick here. I've got just this really simple shape. There's nothing complicated to it, but say that I was doing a lot of kind of stippling and dotting kind of thing. I can take this and then open up my brush presets, and I can make this do whatever I want it to. I can have it repeat, or I can have it flip vertically and horizontally and just angle it differently. And I get more of this kind of randomized pattern that the computer does for me, but it just speeds everything up, which I would have done normally, but this is a different medium than traditional. So why not take advantage of the tools and understand it as a different medium? My biggest tip for this is to use the brush preview window and just try to gauge what your brush is going to do. And honestly, play around with this. It's so much fun. Okay, so then number 5, my last feature is the opacity lock. Now, sadly, I just discovered this even though it's been around for probably years. And that's the thing, after all these years, I'm still learning Photoshop. So I have this general shape. I gave it kind of a fuzzy edge to give you kind of an idea of what this does. So I really like the shape. Say I don't want to change the shape of the silhouette. If I take a brush and I put it over top, it just, it does what you expect it to. It goes right over top. But you turn on the opacity lock and suddenly everything is contained. I can work within my shape without losing that nice clean silhouette. This is especially nice for clouds or just working on your subject or hair. Hair is by far my favorite feature for this. So those are my 5 favorite things for using in digital painting in Photoshop. Now, if you're just learning Photoshop, understand that Photoshop is massive. It's a huge program. So there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to figure out. My philosophy on this is to identify what you're trying to accomplish and figure out which tools you need for that specific job. Don't try to learn the whole thing all at once because you will drown. And honestly, take the time to just experiment and play around. Take some time to accomplish absolutely nothing and just experiment and play around and figure out what each of these tools does. Now, it might seem like a waste of time, but honestly, if you take 1 hour to learn some more features of Photoshop to take to your painting, then suddenly you're not spending an extra 3 hours trying to do something else. All right, so if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps me out. And leave a comment down below if you are a Photoshop user, if you're experienced, or if you're just getting started, or if you just like watching. And that's all for now, peeps. I will see you in the next video.